Welcome back to another episode of Emotional Nightmares. I am your host. My name is Tyler, and on today's episode, we're going to do things a little bit different. We've spent the last 3 seasons talking about the drug addiction, and we're talking about mental health, and today we're going to talk a little bit about co-parenting. I mean, that parenting is a struggle all the way around, especially with our demographics here. So what we're going to do, we got a guest with us. He is a co-parenting relationship coach. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, kind of what that looks like and how that is. So I have with us JP. So JP, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to say, what inspired you to even start your role in co-parenting coaching?
I would say probably the biggest factor was the fact that I grew up in the AA system. Like, my old man got sober when I was like 5, and he was he was an alcoholic to the point where he needed an AA meeting a day, give or take, all that stuff. And so, like a true addict, alcoholic, it's 1,000% or nothing. So then everybody in the family lived and breathed AA. With AA became sponsors. You know what I mean? So I grew up, most of my childhood watching people get help from somebody that was 3 to 5 years ahead of them on the same journey, avoiding, things that are going to trigger you, changing your mindset, changing the way your outlook is, changing your reality around you and all that stuff, all the normal AA stuff.
Yeah.
And then the more that me and my daughter's mother were around other people at the school functions, the sports events, the barbecues, and all these different things, the more that people would bring up or kind of have those little, I wish me and my other parent or my kids' other parent could get along or be in the same place and this and that. And then it just kind of, dominoed into sort of like, well, fuck, I could do the same thing sponsors do to drunks and addicts. You know what I mean? It's not really that much of a difference. It wasn't a big leap for me. It wasn't this thing that was like completely in left field growing up in the AA system,
And so basically, in a sense, you just was like, oh, I'm going to be a sponsor for parenting.
Pretty much. Yeah,
okay.
Essentially.
I like it. I dig it. I like it. All right. So, let me ask you this. So what misconceptions do people have about co-parenting? And when I ask that question, right, that's kind of a loaded question. Let me rephrase that, right? Because when we're talking misconceptions, and I was kind of saying this earlier, in our world, right, in the demographics that we deal with that addiction and mental health, you always see this person and this person are split and the child's stuck in the middle and both parents are sitting here. They won't let me, right? It's always they won't let me, right? So what misconceptions do you see about co-parenting?
Oh, there's a few, but some of the main ones is it's kind of that mindset or that the way that people interact with the other person. Everybody wants to live in their own pity party and blame the other side. You know what I mean? Instead of like acknowledging that you're as much or maybe even more of the problem, because if you're not the person that you want to deal with, you can't blame them for not being the person that you want to deal with. You know what I mean? Same as any other kind of relationship or employee situation or any sort of situations that you're in. You know what I mean? If you're not the employee that you want all your coworkers to be, then you can't really be an asshole to them that they're not doing what you think. The second biggest misconception is that I hear a lot of people kind of always say, well, once my kids graduate high school or move out on their own, then I don't have to deal with the other person. And that's fucking completely bullshit, because somebody's going to miss the birth of the first grandkids, the weddings, the college graduations, the birthday parties, the Thanksgivings, the Christmases. If you guys can't figure it out and be in the same room together, somebody's missing out on everything. And you're connected for life. You know what I mean? And even if some sort of tragedy happens, then you're connected through the grief. And so, like, you're not, it's not a deal where it's like, oh, well, 18 years and then I don't have to deal with that person. That's just not how it is. And I'd say the other one that kind of goes over people's heads is not being aware of how you're talking about the other person when your kids are around you. because
Elaborate a little bit more on that, right? Because that's one of the questions I was gonna dive into. So since you're jumping ahead of me,
right. Well, I
uh,
mean, like I'm 42 years old, and I still, in some form, some part of my brain, think of myself as 50% mom, 50% dad, right? So if you're sitting there talking shit about the other parent's probably not going to hear it, but your kids are, and so you're just beating the shit out of them over and over and over, and then people have this weird deal where they don't understand why all of a sudden their kids are 14, 15, 16 years old and don't want to live at your house anymore and don't come around when they're in their 20s because you've been bullying them and talking bad about them their entire lives.
yeah,
Not really thinking that you're doing that, but you are.
yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, that's the one thing I always appreciated about my dad. Like he would never say, like he would never talk bad about my mom in front of me. Like I knew he did. Like
Right.
I mean, I knew he hated her, but in front of me, like he would always be like, "Oh, it's your mom. You gotta love her," and he would never say anything bad. So I think that definitely plays a pivotal part in all of this.
Right. And if you want to screw your kids up the fastest and the worst, then start doing stuff like that. You know what I mean? Using them as weapons, using them as emotional, toxic waste dumps for all of your problems with the other parent, making them your therapist, and then, not allowing them to love the other parent when they're at your house, and essentially making them become two different personalities and not actually ever figuring out who they are. And then when they get into their 20s, they don't have a clue who they are because I was this person at mom's house who couldn't love dad and couldn't bring him up and da 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 da. And I was this person at dad's house and I couldn't say I love mom or wanted to go back to mom's because I just, felt like I wanted to be around mom that day or whatever the case may be. And then they grow up and they kind of have that same mentality as people that were raised in two extremes. If you got one house that's super religious and one house that's the complete opposite into the scale, they don't really know who they are because it's so different at each place that they can be different people and act like different people, and then you start sprinkling in being deceptive, being used as a weapon, being a spy, doing all these things. You're teaching them these traits and tendencies that are probably not going to be healthy later in life.
Yeah, we see that a lot. Like, I know that I see that a lot in my world, in my practice with counseling clients. You'll get the one parent that's doing actually really well, and it turns into, well, what's your mom doing, or what's your dad doing? Why aren't they doing as good as I'm doing? And then it kind of gets resentment, right? Builds a lot of resentment. How do you help the parents move from like emotional triggers to solution-faced communication, solution-focused communication?
It's a lot of, sort of leaving your own pity party and letting the relationship die and then letting all these feelings that are unresolved sort of go, like anything else. Because if you're still seeing everything through the lens of the betrayal or the anger or the animosity or all of these different things, especially if you end up going through like the divorce process and you're wrapped up in the system where it's all pointing fingers at the other person to try to make the other person look as bad as humanly possible, and then that becomes the way that everybody interacts with each other even after the divorce. And then there's just some things that seem to parallel all the time between people. If you're being a baby, you're being a baby, and most of the time it's kind of the biggest part of it. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to be like, well, it's always them. You know what I mean? And then you have this reinforcement, camp. When you get divorced or you split up, X amount of friends and their families with them, X amount of friends, your families with you. Everybody's going to tell you that you're right and they're the problem and you're not doing anything wrong and all of these different things. And so it's hard to see the reality of what's going on when you don't have anybody that's impartial, that's not, one of your hype men or one of their hype men, because everybody's just going to tell you you're right, they're wrong, they're a monster, you don't do anything wrong, all these different things, which is, the codependency, the enabling kind of behaviors, and then, but once you can stop, you can change these little things in your brain, where you don't say my ex. I don't ever call my daughter's mother my ex because that's not who she is. You know what I mean? Like, we're two people raising our daughter. You know what I mean? Like, I've had girlfriends since we split up. She's had boyfriends since we split up. Like, we're not in that sort of a dynamic. You know what I mean? But when you're using that kind of language, it instantly is gonna give you a certain feeling, and that feeling is gonna get exaggerated by whatever sort of pity party and clouded. So if you're still mad at them, you're using that kind of language, you're seeing everything through an angry lens, but then it doesn't matter what you're talking about, you're going to be reacting instead of responding.
What What do you think the pivotal moment with your own self, right, when you shifted from conflict to collaborating more with co-parenting?
Well, I mean, I was a fucking baby and I was the fucking problem most of the time. You know what I mean? Like, but I mean, like
I like the accountability.
the moment that it all sort of clicked, we got into this deal, this cycle, and I'd get a text from her weekday, and I'd be supposed to have my daughter that night, and this and that, and it'd just be like, what time do you think you're gonna be in? What time are you gonna pick her up tonight? What time are you gonna be into town? Working in construction in a rural area, I may be 100 miles away. Might be 10 miles away. I mean, you're kind of you travel a lot. And so I would say, I would kind of get these things. My fight or flight would instantly go in, kick in as soon as my text message deal would go off because I knew it'd be her asking what time I was going to pick my daughter up and this and that. And I'd say something shitty back. She'd say something shitty back. That'd go back and forth for 3 or 4 days. And then we'd have a big blow up on the phone whenever we had to have an actual, conversation. So then, that happened for about a year, once, twice a month, something. And we got into one of those. I was at my folks' place. My daughter was there. My daughter was like 3 and a half, something. So I go outside because I know we're going to have a big old blow up on the phone and all this stuff. So I'm outside and we're, arguing and yelling at each other on the phone and this and that. So then I turn around. My daughter's standing there crying, and I was just like, I just don't want to live like this. I don't want to be fighting with her all the time. And I don't want, I was raised in a fair amount of chaos. And I'm just like, I don't want my daughter to be raised in chaos because I know that didn't work out for me, throughout my teenage years and 20s when I was dealing with a bunch of this low self-worth, mental illness, functioning alcoholic type behaviors, for, 15 years or more. So then I had to take a look at what I was doing to instigate these situations and whether I was reacting or responding and what kind of communication I was, getting involved in and what kind of stuff I just didn't even need to respond to, most of the time it was me, being a baby and instantly getting defensive because, when it really came down to it, like after I could disconnect, later on and really think about it, like she'd send me that message to figure out if I was going to probably pick my daughter up before she made dinner or after my daughter's dinner time. So she didn't give a fuck what time I was getting into town. She wanted to know if she had to cook something that my daughter would eat or not. But I turned it into this deal like, why are you trying to control what time I get off work and I'm going to be home and you know what I mean? And so I had to, to get to where I had to work on being able to communicate effectively, which was not something that was taught to us growing up. It wasn't something that I was good at up until I actually put intention into it and learned it. And so I had to get one of those little, memo notepad deals. And when she'd send me a text, I would write down what I was initially going to say back. And then if I'd come back to it, a couple hours later after my nervous system calmed down and I wasn't in that, instant defensiveness type mind. And then I'd look at it, and 99% of the time, I'm like, I'm not fucking sending that. That's just going to start a fight. And then I would respond because I wouldn't be so amped up. And then, but it took, 9 months or a year of doing this, and it got to where it just got less and less. And then I was able to just start responding instead of reacting all the time. But it's, breaking bad habits and training yourself in good habits is a lot of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean that was what so what strategies do you think works best for managing boundaries and like boundaries and like when you have like new partners and stuff in the relationship, right? Because I know like on my end, and I'm sure on your end too, like you see that a lot where like the
Hmm.
jealousy now creeps in. It's like, oh, who's this girl trying to replace me, or who's this guy trying to replace me, or all that jealousy stuff. So what strategies do you think works best for managing those boundaries?
I mean, you got to let the relationship go for one. You know what I mean? And get out of the I don't want you, but nobody else can have you jealousy. You know, you got to get past all that because it's never going away if you can't just see the other parent as the other parent. So I mean, getting through all the emotional attachment outside of it just being the other parent is probably one of the most important ones. Not, you know, seeing other people that maybe come in as, you know, not as competition but as collaborators. You know what I mean? Like, why are you trying to compete with people who aren't competing with, you know, why are you competing when you don't need to be? You know what I mean? They don't have to be your competition. They can be um extra support and part of, you know, my daughter's in a blended family right now, and I don't compete with her stepdad. I mean, I don't have any competition with him whatsoever. But that's, you know, I mean, it's easier said than done for sure. But we had, you know, one of the things that we had set up early on that sidestepped a lot of these, you know, hurt feelings and conflicts is we'd set up a deal where if she started dating somebody or I started dating somebody and it was getting serious enough to where they were going to be around our daughter, we got to meet them first.
Huh,
And so
nice.
like there was never a weekend where my daughter came over and said, "Yeah, mom's new boyfriend moved in with us." And there's never going to be a weekend where she goes to her mom's and says, "Dad's new girlfriend moved up in with us," or, you know, this girlfriend, that girlfriend, this girl. You know what I mean? Like if it's a newer relationship, they're probably not going to meet my daughter for, you know, 4 or 5 months because that's not necessarily something that you know, my daughter doesn't need to meet a revolving door. Not that I'm a serial dater or anything, but if it's not something that I see long term, like there's no reason for you to meet my daughter right off the bat.
That's kind of cool. I like that, right? So in a sense, if you're meeting a new girl, not only does she have to get through you, she gotta get through your ex as well too.
Hmm.
I like that. I like that, right? That
But you
that's
have to have a
that's a good
certain
skill.
you have to have a certain amount of respect for each other and sort of be out of this
Yeah.
jealousy type mindset, you know. But I mean, it definitely alleviated a whole bunch of these stupid fights that I see people get into all the time because they try to hide this new partner, and then all of a sudden there's a gal at dad's house that just spent the weekend there with, you know, the kids or mom's new boyfriend, and dad's like, "What the fuck? I got daughters and I don't even know who these guys are that are going to be staying overnight in the same house as my kid." You know what I mean? Like, but, you know, not double standarding a lot of these things, which people tend to do, you know, unconsciously is sort of the same thing. Like, if you don't want them stalking you on Instagram and Facebook, then don't do it to them. If you're allowed to have a life outside of your kids, so are they. So don't be loading your kids up Sunday morning driving by their house to see if there's somebody parked in their driveway from the night before. You know what I mean? Like, don't be doing these things that you don't want done to you. And if you're allowed to have lives and date and do these things, so are they. So, you know.
Yeah, I like that. I think a lot of times so to me that speaks to unconditional love, right? Like because that speaks to like I love you so much that I know I can't make you happy, so like let's hope that somebody else can make you happy, but my child is more important. So like I like that. Um
And I
I
mean,
think a lot of times on our end, what we see a lot of is
mhm,
when the one parent starts to progress, because like you take these relationships, right, and a lot of times you get toxic, where you get where both parties are toxic for each other,
mhm,
and then they break, and there's always going to be that one that just starts surpassing the other, and then it turns into that jealousy as well
right,
too of
right.
you're doing better than I'm doing, and like how can that be, right? How do you deal with that?
I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, a lot of times you need to take yourself out of the equation and the way that you feel about it out of it. Because if you look at it like what's best for my kids and what's going to set them up best to succeed. So, like, the happier that my daughter's mother's house is, and the happier that my daughter's mother is, and the better that they're doing, then the better my daughter's doing when she's there. And then, you know what I mean? But I'm not in competition with them. Like I run, my life and the way that I approach life is different than they do, which is, fine. Nobody has to be the same, but I don't have control over how they are or what they do or, all of these different things. I'm a bit more introverted. I don't go and do a bunch of stuff. They do a lot more vacations and this and that. I don't get jealous because I just, it's not my thing. I don't need to take my daughter on a bunch of vacations when it's not something I enjoy. But
Right.
the time I spend with my daughter is intentional time. I'm not working and I'm not doing all these things and I'm not staring at my phone while she's staring at her tablet and I'm not doing, you know what I mean? And so, I mean, we split time pretty evenly in this and that, but, focus more on what you're doing, how you are with your time, what you're intentional, how much intention you're putting behind being a parent. And don't worry about the other place. I mean, the better they're doing, the more it's going to push you to do better if you do want to see it that way. And then the better life your kid's going to have and the more fulfilled they're going to be, the happier houses that they're going to have. I mean, why would you want your kid to grow up in filth or be in a chaotic place to make yourself feel better, but to hurt them in the long run? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, yeah. So how do you think the unresolved grief and trauma show up in co-parenting, right? Because a lot of that is, and like what we've been speaking about, is a lot of that is a grieving process, right? Like the relationship's done, and there's still trauma, and like that trauma, no matter what that should be, how do how do you deal with that? What do you think?
I mean, being curious, having a little bit of grace, whether it be for the other people or yourself, you know what I mean? Like it's easy to, I'm 5, 8 years into it, and it's easy to think that I don't make mistakes or that some things don't irk me or I don't get triggered and stuff like that. But I mean, everybody does. It's just how you deal with it and handle it. I mean, if something sends me into a thought pattern or emotional state that I necessarily don't think, that I'm not in often or something like that, then I would rather kind of sit and dissect why I'm like, what triggered me, why it triggered me, this and that, as opposed to, you know, seeing red and starting to fight or engaging in conflict or, some of these things. And so, I do the best that I can every day and I try to be a little bit better than I was the day before and being able to just kind of, maybe I didn't do the greatest today, but I don't sit there and beat the shit out of myself, think, because I maybe reacted less than I wanted to or reacted different than I wish I would have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think especially when it comes to mental health and dads, especially, it's easy to really get on this bandwagon of, sort of the internal dialogue of just beating yourself up all the time and telling yourself how worthless you are and how you're constantly failing and you can't show up and you can't do these things and every time you try you're getting in these fights and all this stuff, different stuff. And the reality is, if you're trying your best and you're there and you show up and you're intentional, you're doing a good job and you need to have a little grace for yourself. And there's nothing that says that you have to engage in all of this toxic behaviors and all of these different things, even if it's not necessarily you instigating them. There's nothing that says that you have to, participate. So if you're doing the drop off pickups and they want to cause a scene every time or start yelling at you or pick fights with you, you don't have to sit in the parking lot for an hour and listen to it. If your kids are in your car, you can get in your car and drive away. Just tell the other parent that's not how adults talk to each other. We need to teach our kids, how to communicate better. And this is, you know what I mean? There's no court order that says that you have to sit there and get screamed at on the phone. There's no court order that says that you have to sit there and get screamed at in the McDonald's parking lot. But I mean, getting out of your own way with some of those things is difficult because it's going to come off like maybe you don't care, but you don't necessarily have to care about the other parent. You just have to care about your time with your kids. And the less you're engaging in all of this chaos, the more you can be present with your kids. And so use your time wisely because you can either go round and round and be stressed out and be scatterbrained because you're, going through all this stuff, or you can just put all that stuff to the side, not engage with it, and be present with your kids.
I think that helps the healing process as well too, right? Because if we're not engaged in constant conflict, then we can heal from the conflict that we've already had, and we can move forward.
Yeah.
You know, um, Yeah,
And
I definitely
And I
agree.
mean, the less, and even if it is a deal, I mean, and it goes either way, whether it's the dad pushing buttons or the mom pushing buttons, it doesn't really matter who's pushing the buttons. But the less that you give them the reaction they're looking for, the less they're going to keep looking for that reaction. You know what I mean? So if you're not exploding ever and you're just sending one word text back, just, if you have to limit all of your responses to yes and no, and that's as detailed as you want to get, but every time that they, send you a text, they're trying to poke you or get a rise out of you or make you look like the bad guy or make you look like the, whatever, the less you give them that reaction, it's going to get boring because they're not getting it anymore and they're going to stop looking for it.
Yeah, I agree. You running your own podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. I wasn't sure. Right. So in your own podcast, right? Tell me about your content, right? Like what all do you cover, and like who do you find that it's more helpful for, dads or moms? Like what are you doing the most with?
Uh, Mostly, I would say mostly dads. My podcast is just kind of conversations with anybody about anything. And that's not necessarily a certain kind of topic or anything. I live in a super rural area, so like having interesting conversations with people is gets a little hard. I live in a town of 6,000 people in eastern Montana that doesn't really have anything within 100 miles of us. So that's kind of where
That's
how
my
my deal
dream, is
got.
to come to Montana.
Yeah.
I
Well,
I want to I want to come up
I'm
there
on
to
the
go
flat
fly
side.
fishing.
I'm on the
Okay.
flat
I want to
side.
go fly fishing up there. Like
Yeah.
that's what I want to do.
And then, and so I just, I have interesting conversations with interesting people. Sometimes, wrapped around mental health and this and that. But I mean, everybody's dealing with something all the time. And I mean, it's June right now, and I feel like the most overlooked, outside of the majority of men being overlooked by society the most. I feel like single dads who have, the reality is most of the time when you get divorced, the dads are lucky to get 6, 8, 10 days a month with their kids, and then maybe a couple blocks during the summertime and this and that, especially if they're fairly young, grade school age children. And so I don't think most dads get enough recognition for the toll that it takes on you from going, you get your kids every single day. You're sitting there eating dinner with them, and you always think that there's tomorrow, and so maybe you're not as present as you could be and this and that, but your kids are home with you every single night, and then all of a sudden a light switch flips and you get your kids 6, 8 days a month. You got somebody screaming at you all the time, and then you got the court system telling you that you're a piece of shit because you're gone all the time because you got to work to pay all the bills, and then you're paying the mother of your children to basically babysit your children when really all you want is more time with your kids and all this different stuff, and it's just one of those things that takes a toll on a lot of guys. I mean,
Yeah.
single dads are, I think, one of the biggest suicide rates in the country right now.
Yeah, one of my best friends, he's a single father, and that's one of the things that he talks about the most, is like nobody really understands from that end, because like from a single mother's point of view, like I know I've had a few eh, come on the show, and like they have more resources, they get more help, whereas like
Right.
I have another single father friend who, he can't pay for daycare. So it's like during the summertime, it's like, he loses out on pay because of work, and it's like a mother, well, that's a whole nother story, but like he can't do that, and like they don't get that recognition enough of like, man, like they really are struggling, because if it's a single father, at least in my area and like society as a whole, it's like, well, do your job. But if it's a single mother, it's, oh my God, let me help you.
Right. And it is. It's sort of that, the way that the system or the society views it. Dads are told to shut the fuck up, make sure you pay enough to pay the mom, and this and that, and then it's, yeah, what can we do to help the mom? You know what I mean? Like, here's cheap rent, here's cheap electricity, here's cheap phones, here's cheap all this different stuff, and even say, I know a lot of guys who, the one or the other, whoever had moved, and so they get their kids during the summertime, maybe Christmas break, maybe spring break, that kind of deal. And even knowing that they have the kids for 3 months straight during the summertime, they're still paying the mom child support for all 3 months. You know what I mean? And it's just like, but
Yeah.
even in the instances where, they do week on, week off, and it's 50-50 custody and all of this different stuff, you're still paying, which makes no sense. You know what I mean? And like, more times than not, the mom gets final decision making and all these decision making power, which makes them think that they have, all decision making power. And then it becomes a power struggle all the time. And it's kind of a, it's a flawed system. I mean, it's outdated and everything else, but.
So how do you help somebody work through that, right? So, how, like as a coach, right? Like how do you help somebody work through that struggle? Because that's a mental fuck all on its own,
Right.
right? Like that, and I don't have children, right? I don't have kids. I have a cat and a bird.
Right. Right.
You know, um, and like I can't imagine like the mental fuck that would be of like, now we're fighting this back and forth, and all I have to go off of is like my friends, but like, like my one friend who is a single father, there is no mother in the picture. He literally is just taking care of this kid all on his own. And then I do have a friend that they do the custody thing back and forth, and it's, and he's always stressed the hell out. So like, how do you help that person?
Well, I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around a lot of times, but you can only control what you can control. You know what I mean? And so you go through the process. The court says you got to pay X amount of money. I mean, you can sit and dwell on this stuff, or you can just accept that that's the way it is right now. You know what I mean? I mean, if you can't, you can only change what you can change, and you can only control what you can control. Now, I get some batted eyes sometimes because I'm fairly straightforward and direct, but it's like, if you're not actively doing something to change your situation, then you're just bitching to bitch and nobody wants to fucking hear it. You know what I mean? Because I mean, that's the reality of the situation.
I mean, I like it.
I mean, because I talk to guys quite a bit, and it's like, and they'll, go through the whole spiel of, the court system and the judge and this and that, and they lean toward well, done anything to figure out who else, in your area, in your community that goes through that court system, goes through that judge that has had the same thing happen to them. Well, why would I do that? Because you have power in numbers. Power in numbers is power in everything. So, I mean, if you're one of 5,000 dads that are getting railroaded because, whatever the reasoning is, or feel like they've been taken advantage of, or feel like they got the raw end of the deal, now you're 5,000 people strong. And if you got 5,000 dads that go into your local newspaper, you can start a Facebook page, you can start a TikTok page, you can start an Instagram account, you can go down to your local news station if your town's big enough to where it has a local news station that's not just a, whatever. You guys could group up, support each other, but also make enough noise to where, go over that judge's head and go to the attorney general. Go over that judge's head and go to the state. You know what I mean? Like, are you doing any of these things, or are you just sitting around fucking stewing and bitching about it all fucking day? Well, and a lot of times you get okay, well then, nobody wants to hear it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, nobody, but it's the same kind of deal as like, we all know that guy that was broke in high school, right? That never had any money, that was always broke. And then you went to your 20-year high school reunion, and the same guy's sitting there, and he's talking about how being broke now. And it's like, dude, you're not doing anything to change it. Shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Like, you're not actively taking steps to change your situation. You're just bitching about something that you have no control over right now. You know what I mean? Like, you can't control that you're paying child support or what the amount is. You know that that's there, and you know the consequences if you don't do it. And if you want more time, then you have to set yourself up to be able to prove that or because a lot of times you have to prove to the court system that you deserve more time. So you need to set yourself up. Are you showing up at every school function? Are you showing up at every parent-teacher conference? Are you showing up at every, appointment that you can make it to? Are you showing up at all the sporting events? Or are you just the weekend dad that never shows up to anything except when it's your time? Because if you're not showing up, then everybody sees that you're not showing up, and that's you're not building anything. You're not making any changes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's also crucial to point out, right? Is like, when we're talking co-parenting, we're talking about the people that are showing up. Because like, I do know those people that that I'll see, and like, you'll hear the mom like, oh, he's only here on the weekends, da 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 da. And I always take that at face value. But when you see the action, and it's like, oh yeah, man, like, she has every right to feel and be the way she is, because you have not been a part of the life. You can't just expect the court systems will throw everything at you. I always get reluctant when people like tell me, "Oh, I'm being railroaded." I'm like, "Are you? Like, are you being railroaded, or is it you?" Because if 10 people tell me I'm a crackhead, I'm probably a crackhead.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
And I mean that is one of the deals that I try to get through to a lot of people too. And it's like when we were talking earlier about the other parent talking bad about the other parent around the kids, and if they're doing it around the kids, they're probably doing it to anybody that's going to listen to them, right? And like your actions are going to speak a lot louder than anybody else's words. And so if you are at every sporting event, and you are at every school function, and you are at every parent teacher conference, and you show up on time to drop off and pickups, and you drop them off on time every time, and you're doing and you're there and you're there and you're there and you're there, your actions are always going to tell the real story. It doesn't really matter what the other parent wants to say, because the people at the school that see you there, on the school game nights and the school functions and doing these things, I mean, obviously everybody can't make everything, but if you're there for the majority of them and you're a pleasant person and you do what you're just there to support your kids and stuff like that, that everybody that the other parent's talking to, they're just going to look at that other parent and be like, what you're saying and what they do is not lining up. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I agree. What how do you, so you personally, right? Like, how do
Mm-hmm.
you handle decisions, like parenting decisions when co-parenting, right? Because like you're gonna always have that dynamic of, at my house I don't want this, and then the mom at this my house, I don't care about that. Like, how do
Mm-hmm.
you guys handle that disagreement?
I mean, I got extremely lucky in a lot of ways, and this is one of the ways because we both grew up with both of our parents, married up until her parents are still married. My dad died a few years ago, but my parents were married my whole life as well. From the same small town with the same sort of morals and values and these things and those things. And I say I got lucky because it's not something that we had talked about, parenting styles and this and that, which most people don't before they have kids, and
Well, yeah.
it doesn't work out usually, but in my case, I got pretty lucky. Um, we were able to communicate about a lot of things. We have the same rough views on most things. I mean, I am not the best day-to-day adulter. I'm not really a control freak. I don't need a play-by-play of all of these different things. Her mother is a little more that way, but that's who she is, and I don't try to change her, and she doesn't try to change me. The food that we cook is similar in both places. The responsibilities and chores and structure is similar in both places. So I got lucky in that regard. We kind of have the same thoughts about social media, cell phones, driving, and these things. But
I think that's good for the child, right? Because if
right,
like if this house and this house can both mirror each other,
right,
like we don't have to agree, but if we can kind of mirror each other, it just makes it so much easier for a transition for the child. Whereas like, because if dad's really strict and mom's not so strict, I'm going to live with mom. Like, I'm
right,
not coming to dad's house because he's too
right,
strict. You know what I mean? Like, I
right.
think that mirror is very important.
And it goes into that, kind of goes back to that competition kind of thing too, because I'm not competing with her mom as far as who has the funner house and who we're not competing for her attention or competing for her to love us more than the other parent or any of these stupid childish games that a lot of people play. But if your houses are similar, yes. And then, think when they get adolescent, teenage years and they want to be dependent and they think they're an adult and all of these different things. If one house, say if mom's never home on the weekends because she goes to the bar all the time or has a boyfriend that doesn't live with them or whatever the case may be, but yeah, you can stay here and your 14-year-old boyfriend can come over and hang out all night and stay the night and do all these different things. She's never going to want to go to dad's house because she has her own house. You know what I mean? We all went to high
Right.
school with kids like that. And like that's where you get a lot of this butting heads and you get a lot of this super conflict because one parent is letting them do whatever they want so that they'll stay at their house to fulfill some hole or like, give them this I win, you know what I mean? Like they love me more kind of deal. And it's not. It's not going to set your kids up for success. And it's going to cause a lot of problems down the line because when the kid wants to be at the place where they have the most freedom and the least amount of responsibilities, then it's going to piss the other parent off because you're essentially, bribing your kids to not go to the other parents because
Mm,
you let them do whatever they want. And I
yeah.
mean, you're not setting them up for success. If they have no structure, no rules, no boundaries, and all of these things when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, I mean, it's probably not going to be a very healthy, 20s, until they get about 28, 30 years old, if they make it that far.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, to the people listening, right? What do you want them to get the most? Like, what's your overall message?
I mean, get out of your own way and put your kids first. You chose to have them, they didn't choose to be here. You know what I mean? And so if you can't put your ego or your anger and all of these different emotions and different thought patterns and different personality traits aside to do what's best for your kids, you're failing them as a parent. Because, my idea of success is that my daughter turns out to be a better, more compassionate, more caring, loving, functioning member of society than I am. And if she doesn't, then I failed. You know what I mean? Like that. It doesn't matter what my bank account says. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. It doesn't matter how successful you are in many avenues of your life. Like the sole purpose of being a parent is that your kids are, better than you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that, to be honest with you, that's kind of why I don't have kids, right? Is because like I know myself, like I'm more selfish, right? Like I don't have that in me. Like for me,
Well,
it's
and
more of a like I value independent time more than
right.
I do, and like I've never been willing to give that up. So
And it's, I was always one of those guys that was, if I had kids, I had kids. It wasn't a deal where I felt like they were, I needed to have kids to have a complete life and they were going to, anything like that. But definitely priorities, it was a lot of switches kind of go off,
yeah,
priorities, things you care about, things you don't care about. I mean, your intentions on things and all these different things kind of change because then you got somebody dependent on you, somebody that looks up to you. And then I grew up in an alcoholic household. My dad was a dry drunk most of the years that I was alive, but the the actions, the way that he was, the way that the house was, I mean, yeah, alcohol wasn't in the house and he never relapsed and he wasn't drinking anymore, but everything else was the same. You know what I mean?
right,
And so like there was a lot of childhood baggage and shit that I had to clean up and really dissect and I had to get, forgive my parents. They did the best they could with the tools that they had, but I held on to a lot of, self-worth issues and middle child syndrome, the forgotten child kind of syndrome deal where everybody else was so busy doing their thing that nobody cared if I was around or not, da 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 da. And so if I didn't want to raise my daughter in the same kind of space, then I had to add more tools to my toolbox than my parents had and break generational curses, which, is a big thing in AA too.
yeah. My generational curse is my cat.
Yeah.
Is how I feel. But all right, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that I hope the listeners got something. I hope that you heard something that helps. If not, you can go to JP's YouTube channel. Um, I don't care how you guys get help as long as you get help for whatever you're struggling with, whether it be this channel, another channel. And there's a million podcasts in the world right now. You can find help somewhere. Just type in what you're looking for. So could have been anywhere in the world, and I appreciate you guys for listening to us and being here on this show. So thank you, and thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks, man.
Yep.